to jump in. I feel, as I was somewhat gathering threads of, okay, how do we enter this this jazz together? And one question that seems important, especially because we exist at a time when it's somewhat rare to have a shared understanding with others on almost anything, right? It seems because with the words we use, the context that we hear them in, or the lenses we look through, seem to offer a different perspective or a different association. And so I'd love to start with perhaps the most obvious, which is how do you understand patriarchy? And see where we go from there. And then I'd be curious to hear from either of you. How do you describe patriarchy as a functional, useful definition in which to enter into a conversation like this?
Well, I haven't really shifted a whole lot in how I think about it. I have said this in other places, but I'll go ahead and say it here as a foundational idea that I launched from in my views, and that is to say that in ceremony the holy people said to me, you think you know what masculine is, but you don't, and you think you know what feminine is, but you don't. All you know is how these energetics behave in this power over paradigm. And if you were to put them into a different paradigm, a different situation, they would behave in a completely different way. So given that big clue, and I always say, and I broaden that just to talk about humanity. We don't really know who humanity is in many ways. All we know is how humanity behaves in this power over paradigm. And so that's what I feel like a big part of our inquiry in general in our quote modern world is what else could we be, and so going back to patriarchy, I feel like this is something that's very exciting to me, because I don't feel like I know who are these guys, who are these men, and even what is masculinity? We don't know. We have this one definition out of this one paradigm, and it's a paradigm that's leading to death. And we feel like we're sort of deciding that maybe that's not really what we want to do, or there are other possibilities, right? And so we're opening up the box there. And so I say that I don't want to call men the patriarchy. I mean, in a power over paradigm, masculine, the masculine, or the more powerful, and this is like brute force power, is going to dominate. That's how I see it. And so men are dominating in this prevailing paradigm, and they are being indoctrinated and guided into using brute force tactics by the paradigm itself. And so this is what we associate with men and masculinity. Mm-hmm. But I'm super curious and super excited about, wondering, like, here's this medicine that is all around us, and we don't really know what it is or what is possible there, in so many ways. I mean, it's present. I mean, I say that, and I should back up and say in human society, it's actually present all around us, in natural world, on earth, and I'm going to say in spiritual realms. But as expressed through human being, I don't think we know nearly enough about it. And that's what I'm interested in right now.
I think the reason why I like jazz is because there is no beginning to jazz, is there? Right? You can't say, here's where it begins, here's where the music begins, or here's how to start a jazz number. However you tumble into the space is the music. And you can stretch that to consider every sort of conversation about identities and definitions. Like, how do we even begin to speak about patriarchy that doesn't run us into trouble, right? This is what Pat was saying a while ago. How do we start? How do we demarcate boundaries? How do we delineate edges? Let me say, using the story, that there is still some usefulness in speaking about how we have come to think about it. So I'll use a story by Ursula Le Guin. She calls it the carrier bag theory of fiction. And I'm sure many of us have read this very short story. I'm just going to summarize it. It's not really a story. It's just an observation that we tend to think about human evolution as following the lines of communities defeating other communities, human bodies developing weapons of not mass destruction, localized destruction, spears and knives, and defeating animals and taming territories. And we tend to think of it in terms of phallic systems. And that's the only story we tell about evolution. But then she speaks about this other very soft idea of gathering seeds and carrying it in bags. And because our stomachs are not very reliable carriers of energy, we develop these other bags that we carry home, carry seeds home with, or food to our communities. And then, the thing with reading the world this way is that when people come to it, they make their own judgments. They say the phallic systems, that's patriarchy. And then the carrier bag, that's femininity or matriarchy or something. And I think there's something troubling around that. Let me say patriarchy for me is the apartheid that demarcates too neatly between what the world is doing and how identities show up. It's when we draw a neat line. So patriarchy is not either this or that. It's not, here's masculinity, here is femininity, here's patriarchy. Patriarchy is the line that presupposes that we can treat the world in that way, that I am not already entangled with woman, with ecology, with plant life, with ancestry. The presupposition that I can be neat and tidy. The presupposition, Ian, that I can even say what patriarchy is a form of patriarchy. Right? So I think that definitional frozenness, that desire to freeze bodies into their identitarian boxes and to say, this is what you are, and this is how you should feel. And as a result, this is how the world ought to be. That is patriarchy, in a sense.
Thanks, Bayo. There's a question here in the comments around
Already?
this idea. Oh yeah, this is just some of the conversation. But it brings up a little of what you've, I think, touched on as well, which is essentially this challenge of again, speaking to or approaching these kinds of topics on gender, on identity. And this comment here says, to restory the masculine, should we not begin in the space of the non-binary, smack dab in the middle of queerness, which is our future, which is our now. And that's what some of the comment there. And so I'm holding that side of understanding, yes, okay, like how do we, is in the way we frame the questions, of course, that we kind of lock ourselves into certain ways of understanding. And then on the other hand, there's these sort of vital and raw questions that I'll use one here. This is from an author or writer, Bethany Webster. She's written a book on the mother wound. She's sort of known as the international expert on the mother wound. But she has an article that basically talks about understanding the mother wound in men. So this is something that I've also drawn some sense of this inquiry from. But the question she asked in her essay near the beginning, she says, why do so many men have the impulse to disrespect, hate, or violate women? Where does that really come from, and how do we stop it? Right. So, and then she says, to understand misogyny, we first have to explore the first relationship a man has with a woman, which is his mother. And so, I offer that too, because for me, again, I have this sense of, okay, that seems true as well, alongside these now fluctuating and dissolving like roles of gender. And yet there is something, what feels like, again, sort of biologically, archetypally true, that is also a factor, of course, this deep first relationship that a boy has with his mother. And again, what spills out from that because of the context we're in, because of the care that was offered or not, because of, all these things. So I offer that up because there is like a sort of vital need to be able to address these things, right? From a more, I don't know what you might say, tangible or concrete way in a sense, but also be able to be fluid, right? So again, I wonder what that might stir for either of you.